Okay, and we're back. Hello, everyone. I am joining you in another live stream, as usual, talking more about Scrum and any questions you might have. So I did collect some of the questions in advance, just a few really. And if you are joining live, then just jump into the chat and let me know if you have any specific questions you want me to answer that I can answer right now. Now, before I start, I just wanted to quickly talk a little bit about the new stuff that is happening in Scrum Mastered. I have just released a very new product that is called the Scrum Master Starter Kit that is now available in the store. So if you're interested, now is a great time to go and check it out because I have a special Black Friday / Cyber Monday offer running. And other than that, let me jump in and start getting some of those questions that I have gathered. Okay, so one of the first things that came up, well, pretty recently really, is all about coming from people who are trying to change into the Scrum Master role. So they are looking for a job, they're looking for right training and a way to more properly pass the interviews, right, and show their skills. And what I've noticed often happens is that we kind of take what we have in our previous roles and we portray what we did previously without really focusing enough on all of those different skills that you inevitably really has gathered to that can help you really to be a great Scrum Master, right? So for example, if we look at the Scrum Master role, we know that a Scrum Master should be a teacher, should be a coach, should be there to really help everyone understand Scrum. And if you are trying to portray that you can be a Scrum Master, I think, well, the first thing, obviously, is to try to portray those skills. Just recently, I was talking with someone who actually had all of those skills, but they weren't really shown on their resume and they weren't really shown during the interviews, right? So I think that is one of those things that is definitely helpful, is to rework your resume in such a way that it highlights the most important skills and knowledge that a Scrum Master should have. So that's kind of one of the things. And then the more specific question that I got is, let me just pull it up. It's more about the interview. And obviously, interview is one of those things that is, well, difficult, right? If you are especially joining, trying to get into this role. I'm sorry, just trying to pull it up a little bit so that I can see. Yeah, so how any help you can offer with interview questions. So in terms of the interview questions, obviously, it all depends on who interviews you. Hi, Anita, I see your question. So I will get into that and I'll jump into this question and answer it. So going back to the interview questions, it all depends who interviews you. So if it's me who interviews you, who is looking for someone more specifically to fill in the role, then I would ask a lot of questions that are Scrum based, right? Trying to really figure out whether you understand Scrum. But then if you, maybe it's more of a manager or a team lead who is interviewing you, they most likely will be focused on other questions, right? Not that Scrum specific. But I would say the first things first is to make sure that you have that quick understanding of Scrum, of the terminology, and really be able to show that you have that knowledge so that you don't always kind of go into thinking about something such as what is daily Scrum, what is the sprint planning, etc., etc. So I think this is the first thing, just to make sure that at least this is covered. Obviously, other things that most likely will be asked is, experience, right? Experience working with some of the specific situations, right? As a Scrum Master, whether teaching people or maybe facilitating events. And you might not have that experience per se, but it doesn't mean that you don't have the skills or other similar experiences that would work in those situations. For example, if the question is, well, how would you facilitate a sprint planning, right? If you've never facilitated a sprint planning more specifically, remember any other experiences where you needed to facilitate a discussion, or you needed to facilitate maybe a small workshop, or anything really where you were allowed people to come up to a conclusion or to a decision together. So this facilitation experience still really works for you, even if you have never facilitated sprint planning. So think about some of those experiences. And then in terms of, well, what do you actually do in those events, right? If the question, most likely the questions that you will get are around, what do you do, right? What do you do daily? What do you do in planning, review, retrospective? And go back to what Scrum tells us. Scrum actually explains everything that really, the Scrum Guide really explains everything that you need to do. And obviously, there are so many different examples that you can find more specifically for retrospectives of how to facilitate them. So I think kind of getting those under your belt, collecting some of those ideas of once you start, how are you going to facilitate them? Right. So I think that definitely can be very helpful. You're kind of starting to collect your Scrum Master's toolbox, even if you're not in the role just yet. Because once you get the role, well, you need to be prepared, you need to be ready. And obviously, that's why I was talking at the beginning about the Scrum Master Starter Kit, is the tools like that, really, something that can help you get started. And once you have those tools, you can use them during the interview, of course. Okay, so I'm going to cover this question and kind of finish this. I see some of the questions here in the chat, so let me jump into those. So Anita asks, will DevOps certification or any other will help to get a Scrum Master job for someone who wants to switch from domain? I think that it depends on where you're looking for a job. I know, for example, in Canada, having a certification is pretty important. I would say that definitely having a professional Scrum Master certification or a certified Scrum Master can be very helpful. DevOps, I don't see that often, to be honest, that this is that is required, but I can see how a DevOps certification can be quite helpful in gaining trust and creating more credibility in front of more technical people. So if you maybe have a technical director who is looking for a Scrum Master to join, and especially since you are switching domains, if you have a DevOps certification, that's a plus, right? Because they can see not only do you know Scrum, but you also have knowledge in some of those technical practices. It means that it kind of adds more value to that. Though, as if I am looking for a Scrum Master, I'm not specifically looking for a certification in DevOps, but I can see the appeal for specific situations and especially for specific types of recruiters or hiring managers. Will SAFe certification along with CSM help in getting a job? SAFe is pretty popular in big organizations. A lot of organizations implement SAFe. Kind of the bigger ones, obviously the medium-sized organizations are not specifically interested in SAFe because they don't need that scale of Scrum. So if you are targeting some of the bigger organizations, then SAFe can be a great thing to have on your list. But once again, the same as with DevOps. It can be pretty good in specific situations. It can be good kind of an extra bonus, an extra point on your resume is to have this certification for specific hiring managers, but it's not something that by default will get you a job. I think what really helps, obviously certifications are great, but the more and more what I see is that professionals in the industry kind of look at certifications and sometimes don't really care whether you have certification or not, just because what is more important is how well do you understand the topic. So if you are actually getting into the interview, that those are the questions that most likely will come up is very fine. Well, do you actually know it? Because getting a certification in a way that can be easy, but knowing how to apply all of that knowledge, that's the hard part, right? So I think having those certifications in your resume will get you through the first, the first triage of the resumes. I think through the systems that can be definitely helpful to have those certifications. But then the question is, can you show that knowledge in real life? And then talking about the job, actually getting a job, I think it's better overall to be part of a larger community and starting to know people in the community, in the Agile community, in the Scrum community, in your area. And that really helps, right? Because people start to remember you, right? Well, for example, Toronto is a pretty small Agile community. You kind of know everyone at some point. You just go to the events, you already know everyone. And I think that really helps because people start to know each other. And then when there is a new job opportunity that comes up, they think about each other. Well, who can I invite to that job? Right? And I think that can be definitely helpful in finding the job. I would also think about opportunities to volunteer and to help some organizations with, such as meetups, for example, with organizing things, or maybe there is a presentation or workshop that you can actually run that kind of puts you in front of people, even if you are not in the position yet. Well, there are things that you can share, right? There are experiences and knowledge that you have acquired by now as you are switching from a different domain. And you can gather that knowledge and share it. People like to hear some of those stories, really, and understanding how do people find Scrum, find agility, and what it means for them, why it's important to switch. So there might be some opportunities for you to also kind of put yourself out there by participating in community events. So I think this is something that really helps. Being active in some of those communities can be extremely helpful as well, because this way you are letting people know that, hey, I am interested, I am trying to get the knowledge and the experience, and just kind of being there and getting your name out there. That I think definitely is in a way more helpful. I feel like getting through this triage of resumes can be pretty hard, and that's why I'm trying to slap all of the different certifications in there so that your resume comes up. But sometimes it's easier to actually get there through networking. So I think networking is definitely something that is pretty helpful overall. So, and I think I have a lot of the stories of people really switching from a role that is completely different into the Scrum Master role is happening through them connecting with people who are in those roles. And maybe someone in the organization, say you're working right now in a company and you're working in a completely different department or a completely different role, reaching out to the Agile Center of Excellence or that Agile group can be a great way to kind of start getting into it, saying, hey, can I shadow some Scrum Masters? Can I see what this is all about? And I feel that people who really are interested usually are able to get through that transition much easier, just because they show the passion, they show the interest. And I think that really helps. So going back to networking once again. Okay. Are there any other specific questions in the chat? Give it a second. If anyone wants to add a question. Otherwise, I will move on to one more question that I have. It is more specific to a daily Scrum that I wanted to cover. Okay. So another interesting question that I kind of came up recently in one of the community events at our Master in Scrum is around daily Scrum. Well, I have just released the video about that. And the question was very specific, as in, we know that daily Scrum is not a status meeting. Okay, so how do we make sure that it doesn't turn into a status meeting when you're a Scrum Master? How do you make sure that doesn't happen? And I just found it is a really, really great question. And daily Scrum can turn very quickly into that status meeting. So I thought that it would be great to actually bring this up right here. See your question there. China, I assume that's how you pronounce your name. I really hope that it is. So I didn't want to butcher it. I'll get to that question once I answer the daily Scrum one. So how do you help the team to actually self-organize in the daily Scrum and not kind of overstep and become... Okay, great. And become a status meeting. And one of the first things I said is it is much more difficult to do it right now in a remote setting because, well, you kind of are attending the meeting if before you were able to maybe sit back and just listen into the daily Scrum, and that would help you to kind of step away and let your team to self-organize. Now, when you are on the call, there is kind of some expectation there that you will be facilitating it. And I think it's more first starting off with teaching the team about what this daily Scrum is all about. It's not for me, for a Scrum Master. It's for you to sync up, to plan the day together. I'm just here to maybe listen in, or just here to make sure that if you have any questions, I can answer right away. And the next thing would be to actually stop facilitating it. I know that it kind of sounds weird, but I feel that often once we kind of start getting into those meetings, because there's an expectation that you will be facilitating them, then you naturally kind of jump in and start facilitating it. Asking, well, okay, who's next? Okay, you finish. Who is next? Who is going to be speaking? Okay, let me take some notes. Okay, who do we need to talk to? So you're kind of jumping into that facilitation stance. And I think it's much more important for you to instead just not do that at all and let the team figure out the right way to do it. And I think this is kind of the first step, is actually step away, even if you are in a meeting. Making sure, first of all, that people understand I'm not here to facilitate it. That's for you. I'm just here to listen in. Okay, we have established the boundaries of this of your role of a Scrum Master in the daily Scrum, and then just let it flow. And I will tell you that the first meetings will be very weird because people won't know how to self-organize just yet. But eventually they will figure it out. So just let them do it and let them figure out how they want to do that meeting themselves, because this is what really works. So kind of stepping away. And then also the 3 questions. Obviously, we know the 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What I'm going to do today? And do I have any blockers? Well, forget about those 3 questions. They don't exist. And the first, I think the key question to really ask if you are trying to give your team the idea of what they need to be discussing in daily Scrum is to ask, what are we going to do as a team today in order to get closer to achieving our sprint goal? And that's it. That is the only question you need to ask. And then they can figure out how to work together in order to answer that question, right? So it's no longer the 3 questions. Okay, so let me get back to China's question. Okay, so I haven't answered this one. So when one gets their PSM certification, what are some ways that you can gain experience? Many jobs that are looking for 2-3 years experience. Yeah, interesting enough, they are looking for 2-3 years of experience, but they are also calling this job a junior Scrum Master. But yeah, that's kind of the reality of recruitment right now. I would say that even if a job description asks you for 2 to 3 years of experience, and apparently there is actually a study that we often do not actually apply, even though the recruiter might not be specifically looking for that many years of experience, really. They're just looking for a good candidate. And right now, the years of experience is kind of the only way how you can sometimes highlight whether you're good or not. I will tell you that when I was looking for a Scrum Master to replace me when I was moving away from one of the positions, we did put as well, I think, on the job description 2 or 3 years experience, which I not necessarily wanted to do, but we did it anyway. And when I was looking at the resumes, I would look into the resumes that had less experience because I liked those resumes much better because they were written for the job, right? Sometimes people also write, hey, I'm very new, I do not have experience, but I am really passionate, I'm looking for this job. And that, at least for me, for a recruiter or hiring manager like me, I would appreciate that. And I would look into that, and definitely did invite people to an interview who didn't have the 3 years experience, even though we had put it in the job description. So in terms of how do you gain experience, if you are already working, obviously, in the organization that's looking for opportunities internally, I think that's kind of the first thing. Looking for opportunities, can you reach out to Scrum teams, to Scrum Masters or Agile coaches and try to participate in their meetings and their communities of practice? That is kind of the first thing. And then in terms of if you are not part of the organization, and I'm not sure, China, if you're there, but looking into opportunities to maybe facilitate some events, participate in some meetups, kind of volunteering. This is something that I mentioned a bit earlier. I think that can be helpful because this is how you can get some of that facilitation and teaching experience. And that is kind of the way to go about it. Obviously, it's not like a work experience, but this is something that can still help you. Another thing is obviously looking maybe for opportunities to volunteer for small organizations. If you're trying to get, say, 6 months of experience, maybe there are small companies, startups who can't really afford to pay for a full-time Scrum Master, but would love someone being there and helping them. I definitely know at least of one case of something like that happening where a person didn't have experience but volunteered to help one small organization. after 6 months, she had 6 months of experience, and she was able to get a job that she really wanted. And I think that was a really great, inspiring example of how to get the experience you need. It's kind of like, look at it as an internship, I'd say, right? Unfortunately, most likely unpaid, but this is something that can help you get that experience as well. I think there are a lot of teams and small organizations who would love to have someone there to help them understand agility, to help them implement some of those processes, help them understand their roles, Yeah, sometimes we don't even think about these things, right? Yeah. So definitely go out there, try to find people and ideas of where can you actually jump in, where can you participate. And I think there are always opportunities for that. Awesome. Okay. I don't have any questions anymore that I have prepared in advance. So are there any other questions? Say communities. When you say communities, is there somewhere specific many Scrum Masters communicate? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Meetup. There are a lot of communities on Meetup where you can join. They usually organize events. Then, obviously, I am running a community that is called Master in Scrum. So we have that community running where I'm trying to also bring in more Scrum Masters, whether they have experience already and they're working in the role, or they're just kind of trying to get into the Scrum Master role. But those are kind of the key things that obviously come to mind. I think Meetup overall is a much more sane and positive place rather than, say, LinkedIn groups. I had a very bad experience with groups like that, where it was just a little bit not really focused on helping each other, not really focused on communication, but more focused on, promotion or showing who has more certifications or whatnot. I feel like meetups are a really great place because you have events, you have an opportunity to learn something, right? That is why I am creating my own communities, because Meetup has the events part, but it doesn't have the after events community part, right? So I think the events is awesome. A lot of communities such as Scrum Masters of the Universe is a great one. You can look into the Liberators network. So communities like that, where you can learn something, you have people coming in, you have some speakers, right? I will be speaking at the Scrum Masters of the Universe next year. I will be speaking at the Agile network for one of the other meetups next year once it's confirmed and we have the dates in. And these are great communities. Then you can look into some of the conferences or open spaces that can be happening overall. Right now, obviously, a lot of conferences went online, which is good and bad. Good is that you can attend them wherever you are. It means that you can attend a conference anywhere really, on the planet, as long as it aligns with your time zone, at least a little bit. Bad thing is you don't have that opportunity to network, right? You have a little bit of that, but not in the same way as it was before. But if you are, say, going into smaller groups or smaller workshops, you usually have an opportunity to meet other people. Say, if you're in a small group, working group for a workshop, then you're meeting people in your group. So that is great. So some of the ones that come to mind here for Canada would be Agile Games, Open Space. We have Toronto Open Space, Toronto Agile Conference Open Space. So there are opportunities to kind of jump into those as well, but you obviously cannot participate as much as you can in smaller communities or more dedicated communities, such as Mastering Scrum that I curate, or some of the meetup communities. So those might be a bit more accessible. Yeah, and basically that's kind of some of the ways of how you can meet other people, how you can get more exposure, also learn from others. Yes, so the let me open up my settings if I can't figure it out. I never know how. Okay, hi chat. Okay, so let me put in some text. Oh, nope. Nope. Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay, so this is the Mastering Scrum community, which has the open community there, which I think we have like 500 members right now. But I'm also building a smaller group of people kind of in the premium pro community, where we have much more interaction. We have weekly meetings, we have daily prompts and challenges. So we're really trying to create stronger connections with each other. So that is something that you can check on the website and learn more about all of this, of the community. Then other things, another one that I mentioned, let me put it in here. Okay, so this one's Scrum Masters of the Universe, which is run by Jamie Kriegel, who is also one of the members of the Master in Scrum community. She has a lot of awesome speakers there. And a lot of people who I personally know, who have been to my classes, or who are kind of part of the same community, they're there. So it's great. I think they have some really good things happening. And then the other one that I mentioned is this one, the Liberators Network. The Liberators are two professional Scrum trainers. They are based in Netherlands, but their network is worldwide. So they also have some great events and people participating in their community. I think they have pretty regular events as well happening in there. Yeah, so those are like the first ones that came to mind, but I think if you kind of jump in and look what else is available, you'll be able to find others as well. Okay, let me jump. Okay, yeah, of course. You're welcome. I hope to see you in some of those events as well, in some of those meetups and communities. Okay, waiting for another question. For anyone else who is there, if you have questions, feel free to put them in chat, because we do have time. And I will jump into some. I feel that I have received questions recently. on my YouTube channel. Let me see. I think that I haven't answered some of them. Okay, those are already answered, some of those. So, okay. While you're typing, I'm going to jump into another question that came up also recently in the community, and I thought that can be a good one. Asking about retrospective formats. How do you choose a retrospective format for your team? Because if you look how to run a retrospective online, you're going to find so many different resources. So how do you actually choose which one is the best one? And obviously, the best answer is it depends. It depends on your team. It depends on your relationships with your team. It depends on the maturity level of your team, at the overall situation and communication that is happening. Also, on how did the last sprint go, right? So this is something that can also define what kind of retrospective you might decide to go with. And I think that there would always be kind of a set of very simple retrospective formats that you can use pretty much anytime, but they will give you good results, but not to the point where you can maybe deep dive into a specific topic, such as, the easy ones would be lean coffee, the 4Ls, or mad, sad, glad, kind of the retrospectives that give you pretty simple, simple categorization of the what you're going to talk about, or what went well, what could be improved. So those are very simple, and I would say you can pretty much run them at any point. But if you want to really help your team to take the next step to deep dive, then you should be looking into more specific topics. And the easiest example would be, say, if your team is struggling on recognizing what factors they are able to address themselves, to control, and which factors are kind of external to their team and they cannot address, but that are coming up all the time in your retrospectives. You might help your team to separate those factors by running the which one is it? I think it is the hot air balloon, where you look at the internal factors that helped or hindered you, and then external factors. So you're kind of focusing the discussion of the team external versus internal, versus, for example, the sailboat, where you're focusing on the past and the future. So the discussion points that you want to bring up into your retrospective can also help which retrospective you're going to choose, right? So, and this is something that I do in my retrospectives, like tools like Retrospective Poker, for example, or the book that I have. Those are some of the factors that I implement into each one of those techniques to help you define, well, which technique do I want to choose for this sprint, for this team, based on their maturity, as well as the discussion points that you want to bring up. Okay, so question. Do you feel there are any books that could help further expand a beginner's knowledge, or kind of just help get acclimated with regards to becoming a Scrum Master, making the career pivot into this field? There are some, I think, books that can be pretty good in helping you see real life situations. And, well, first of all, get ready for them, because you will see them in real life once you start working as a Scrum Master, but also give you some ideas of how you can approach them. And obviously, those are some of the things that can help you get some of that experience, even though you don't work in the role. So those books are, the first thing that I would recommend is the Zombie Scrum, which is okay. So Zombie Scrum Survival Guide. I really like this book. This is awesome. It talks about specific problems that you might see in a team when you are working in a Scrum team. And also, obviously, how to address them. It's pretty practical overall. Then another one that I would recommend is the Fixing Your Scrum, also written by another professional Scrum trainer. And this is great as well because it kind of focuses a bit more on that practical view of what are some of the usual issues that you might encounter and how to resolve them. So why I recommend those two is more specifically because they're much more practical than just a book about Scrum, for example. And then the other thing that I think can be pretty helpful is browsing some of the forums and discussions that are happening in real life for people. I really liked going to the scrum.org forum. They have a forum there that is open to anyone. And I really liked looking at some of the questions that people were asking because they explain, hey, here's what is happening in my organization. I would pay attention to who replies so that you don't kind of fall into the trap of learning something that isn't true. So there are the trainers there who are replying to a lot of the forum messages. You can check that by going into their profile. But I think it's pretty good to kind of see real life examples of Scrum and the typical problems that might occur, and also see some of the ideas people might be kind of throwing into it. Same as with the Master and Scrum Pro community, where we talk about some of the more specific actual situations that are happening, right? Working in a conflict situation, right? Talking about estimation, for example. How do you choose a retrospective format? A team that has a specific challenge they're going through, and how do you approach that? I think there are a lot of opportunities to see in what kind of situations people find themselves in when they are a Scrum Master. So I just kind of want to look into some of those questions that often come up. I often see questions around estimation. For example, how do you implement estimation? How do you use velocity and all of those things? That usually comes up. It's a complex topic, but I really like this topic. That is really something that comes up pretty often for people because organizations want to implement metrics. Velocity is the first one that comes to mind to people, and then they don't know how to properly use it. So people would be facing situations like the team hasn't finished a work item, but they want to have those points calculated into their velocity, and they get upset if you don't. So how do you deal with situations like that? So all related to estimation. So when I'm talking about estimation, what I mean is relative agile estimation, not the timeline, and not like project charter or project budget estimations. I'm talking about story points, which is a very common way to estimate work items when it comes to Agile and Scrum. And basically how it works is, because we cannot really estimate in hours, in days, and in minutes, just because the work that we do when we're working with Scrum team, when we're developing products, is complex. So we say that if we estimate in hours or days, those estimates are very inaccurate, and they don't guarantee that you will be finished by that time. So kind of, in the Scrum sense, we accept the fact that the estimates are incomplete at any point. So instead of using hours, days, like the absolute estimation, we use relative estimation. So we use story points, right? And then we use it to calculate how much work we're able to accomplish within a sprint. This is not Scrum specific. This is not like a rule in Scrum, but this is a very popular way to estimate work. And kind of coming back to your question about what else can you do to kind of get ready and maybe get the knowledge you might need, is to look into some of those practices, kind of best practices that a lot of teams might have or might implement, such as how is a typical sprint structured? How do you usually schedule it? What does it look like? Or practices around estimation, right? Story points and planning poker. Practices such as user story writing, or creating product backlog. And what does it look like to create a product backlog? So I think there are a lot of practices that are not like Scrum. Those are not Scrum rules, but they are very useful in a lot of ways. But also, those are the things that a lot of people will ask for. Like if you're coming into an interview, I'm pretty sure that one of the questions will be around estimation, around story points. So you will hear things like, our team velocity is 13, and we have a user story that's 21, estimated at 21. So what do we do? And if you don't know what it means, obviously you cannot really answer. So it's good to know some of those practices, at least be familiar with them a little bit. Just trying to think about what other practices. Things like user story mapping. That's a great practice to look into. Team agreements. How do you facilitate a team agreements workshop, for example? All of those things can be pretty helpful for you to kind of going into those discussions so that you know what people are talking about. I'm just thinking about kind of tools. And obviously, in terms of practices, the first things that come up are the burn down charts and the Scrum boards, which are very popular. Those are not Scrum, like they're not required, but people most likely know about them and might ask. So figuring out how do those things actually work and how you as a Scrum Master might be able to use them in your work can be pretty useful as well. So that is something. In terms of tools, yeah, that's completely slipped my mind. So in terms of tools, obviously, you might have things like Jira, Azure DevOps. I'm pretty sure you might have that kind of in the job description, saying that you need to know how to work out with those tools, which I personally don't think is needed at all, but I kind of can see how it might come up in some of the job descriptions or even questions. So knowing what kind of tools are usually used in organizations and have at least a basic understanding of how they're used might be pretty good, because that is kind of another plus that can help you if you kind of know your way around Jira or Azure DevOps. Those are kind of the big ones that people use, a lot of organizations use. But just to highlight, you don't need to be an expert. You are not supposed to be an admin of those tools. You're not the owner of any of those metrics or practices. It's just those are the things that often come up and are being used in your organizations. So it's good to know a bit about them. So I think that is kind of something that often comes up. Looking back to what else has been happening in our community. Okay, that's the retrospectives. Yeah, Jira comes up quite often. It's just, I think there will be organizations and managers and teams who will have an expectation that you're, as a Scrum Master, are supposed to be like a Jira admin. You shouldn't be. That's not your role. And instead, it might happen that you will be asked to do that, but you should be there helping instead your team figure out how to better use those tools, kind of helping the organization use those tools in an agile way, rather than being like an owner or an admin of those tools. That you shouldn't do that. That's not part of your job. But you might need to kind of go through a process of delegating it back to the team, teaching people how to use it properly. But you shouldn't have to be the expert of those tools. What else do I have? Oh, another thing that came up, like Kanban, it's not like you need to be an expert because there is a whole certification path on Kanban. It's like Scrum, right? It's whole framework. But just knowing the basics can be very helpful, because within every sprint, you might have a Kanban board. So knowing what a Kanban board is and how to use it, it's very simple. Very, very simple. Kanban board, it's like to do in progress done. But if you look into the theory behind the framework, there is much more, many more rules, I'd say, that you should know of. But this is something also I think that can come up. Now that I walk through a lot of those things, it's kind of, there's got to be a guide of what a Scrum Master should know, before even starting. Yeah, concerned because you're not really a pro with Jira. Yeah, Kanban shouldn't be very complicated. Like, don't go too much into like the details there, because it's a whole new different framework. It is pretty complex, but just understanding the basics and how you would use it with your team can be useful. But no, I'm not pro Jira. I kind of became a pro Jira at some point, but it's wasn't intended. And then now many organizations start to use the Azure DevOps, and I've used it like once, and that's fine. It's just another tool, like any other tool we use. Like, for example, Miro, it's a new tool that I started using last year for my workshops and classes, or Asana, for your task management. It's just another tool. And I think that's kind of just something that you naturally will figure out as you start working with it. Cool. Okay, looking at, I still have a few minutes. So if there is any other questions from you, China, or from anyone else who is watching, feel free. Um, and And apart from that, it gave me, like, this discussion actually gave me a lot of great ideas of what can be helpful for Scrum Masters, kind of, I think having that list of things of what a Scrum Master should know is a great idea. I'm already kind of thinking about what it can be. What kind is it? A guide, or maybe I have the action plan for Scrum Masters, for example. Is it an addition to action plan for Scrum Masters? I really like that. It's really good. Oh, all certifications, of course, they will want you to have everything. They will also want you to have 10 years of experience. And still will want you to pay you as if you're a junior Scrum Master, right? Would it be an overkill? I think there is just so much to learn, and it's more about, for you, as you kind of start working in this role, figuring out, well, what else do I need? What else do I want to learn to help me personally, right? You might go into the path of looking more into the technical practices, such as DevOps, for example, something that came up. Or maybe you are more interested in the scaling of Scrum. So you might go for Nexus, less safe. There's like a whole set of different certifications. Then I'm interested in facilitation. So I'm interested in things like Lego Serious Play or Bika Blue, for example, like visualization and things like that. There is the whole coaching path. So there are a lot of different paths that you can take. Once you kind of get into that, and then you understand, well, what do I like? Where do I want to develop more? And I think there is so much you can learn. You can never have everything. It's impossible. You would be just doing the certifications all the time. Though I do know one person in my LinkedIn who has like over 100 certifications. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know how he does that, but it's an impressive achievement. If you want to go for it, go for it. It's really up to you. Yeah, that's crazy. He was in one of my PSM2 classes. We're pretty impressed when he was posting about one more certificate he got. Crazy. Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to be closing off this live stream. It will be available for the as a recording. So if you want to jump back in to listen through the answers again. And if not, I would love to see you in the Mastering Scrum community. And if you are interested in joining our pro community as well, then I would be happy to see you there. You can find all the information within the community. You can find a lot of the information on my website at scrummastered.com. And if you want to, if you have questions or anything you want to figure out, maybe you have a question about the community or a specific question you want me to cover maybe in the next stream. So this is my email. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to send me a message. I try to reply to everyone. I sometimes get a swarm of emails and messages, and it takes me a while to reply, but I usually always reply. And apart from that, yes, if you are interested in some of the workshops, workshop guides, or starter kits and bundles that are available on my website, it's at shop.scrummastered.com. So I am running a Black Friday deal until the end of Monday. Then it's going to be gone, and it's going to be gone. So if you are interested in any of those, go ahead and check it out. There's bound to be something that would be great for you. And if not, if you have a specific topic or that you would like me to cover, maybe in one of the upcoming guides. Once again, here's my email. Send me a message, and I'd love to. I would love to do something that would be beneficial and helpful for everyone. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next month. Bye.